All right, welcome back to the Intercept edition of Breaking Points here with Ken Klippenstein. And thank you guys for making this possible. The people who contribute to Breaking Points have facilitated this partnership that we've been able to get off the ground and allow us to do some of this independent reporting and then bring it to you today. Ken has multiple scoops in a single piece about the relationship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia and Israel and the Palestinians, the Middle East and Iran, all of it coming together in the kind of creation of a new Abraham Accord. While nobody's watching, it feels like the Biden administration is making history here in some ways by basically pushing forward with Jared Kushner's what I would say catastrophic Middle East policy, and basically cementing it in place and expanding it further. And there are so many different layers of what you've reported here. But let's start with the U.S.-Saudi relationship. What did you uncover about what's going on between us and Saudi Arabia right now?
Yeah, so it was reported recently that President Biden intends to meet with MBS, which is a huge about-face from how he campaigned.
This is the crown prince who ordered the bone sawing of Jamal Khashoggi.
Yes, and on whom Biden ran in contrast to President Trump, saying that I'm going to hold him accountable, going as far as saying that I'm going to make him a pariah.
Right.
And I can't think of stronger language that the U.S. has ever used for Saudi Arabia. And
began by refusing to speak to him. He said, "You're not the official ruler of Saudi Arabia. You can talk to my flunkies. I'm talking to the king." And MBS said, "Cool, how do you like $4 a gallon gas?" Basically.
Exactly. And that contributes to inflation, as we've written about. And this is a huge dimension to all of the economic problems that we're seeing right now that I think gets short shrift in media reportage, just because the Saudis and, like the Emiratis and other Persian Gulf nations have a very effective think tank apparatus in Washington to make it so that you don't hear about these things. And I'm not saying it's the only factor, but it is a major factor behind, as you say, the gas prices that we're seeing, but also inflation. Oil factors into the price of everything, as we've discussed before on this show.
And so you wrote about a recent, very high-level meeting to go over a classified 15-page document that lays out a new strategy for a relationship with the Middle East. What were you able to learn about that classified document?
Yeah, so it looks like the Biden administration, or at least prominent factions within it, because there are different groups that there are some that are not happy with what's going on, are pushing for normalization with Saudi Arabia. And so, when Biden goes and meets with him, as it's been reported he is going to do, that appears to be a part of a regional push to try to tighten bonds with Riyadh. And so what I found over the course of the reporting and talking to people close to the administration and in the intelligence community about what they're working on is very interesting. They are going about this in a very quiet and secretive fashion. I reported recently on CIA Director William Burns' travel to the region, not just Saudi Arabia, to meet with MBS for the first known time that has happened, but with other regional leaders, MBZ, the de facto ruler of the UAE.
Now actual ruler.
Yes, and that's right, now actual ruler. And in Qatar. And so the question then is, well, why are they using the CIA director to conduct this? Well, that gives them a lot of discretion. That's what you do when you want to keep it quiet, when you don't want it to leak. And the question to me is, well, why don't they want it to leak? I mean, when you talk to people close to the administration, what they'll tell you is, because it's embarrassing.
Right.
The contours of this agreement, as you said before, are remarkably similar to what President Trump pursued in his Abraham Accords.
And so the insight that Jared Kushner brought to this process was, and he has said this out loud, he has said everybody for decades has thought that you need to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian question before you can make broader peace between the Arab countries and Israel, because the Arab countries have been saying, we're not going to normalize relations with Israel as long as there's an illegal occupation of the Palestinians going on. They'd say, well, whether they believe in it or not, they would say the Arab street, their public, would not allow them to normalize relations with a country that is still engaged in an illegal occupation. Kushner said, no, that's not the case. In fact, it's just what he called a real estate dispute between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And with enough money, enough access to surveillance technology, and enough access to weapons transfers and other kind of elite cultural transfers, you can create deals between Saudi Arabia and Israel and the UAE and Bahrain and others that completely sidestep the Palestinian question. So that was the Kushner strategy with the Abraham Accords. The Biden administration is not going as far as to say that publicly, but is what they're doing suggesting that they're like, okay, maybe we'll just do what Kushner did, just ignore the Palestinians?
Again, I think prominent factors with the administration, absolutely, that's what they're doing. And one of the most frustrating aspects of reporting on this is that the way in which they're doing it, the very secretive fashion, you don't use a CIA director instead of career diplomats who are supposed to do these things unless you don't want it to come out, suggests that they're trying to lock this thing in before there is the chance for the public to register their frustration with how bad of a deal this would be, not just for the people of the region, but for the United States.
Right.
I interviewed for the story that I did Trita Parsi, the vice president of the Quincy Institute.
Yeah.
Yes, and he said, completely aside from the rights of Palestinians, the fact that this does nothing to address this burning regional problem there and Iran. What does this do for the United States?
Right.
And depending on what's in it, I understand that there's some discussion about security guarantees for the Saudis. This could have the effect of locking us in to a relationship that forces us to respond to problems not only that affect them, but that might be of their own creation in terms of antagonizing the Iranians, antagonizing the Houthis in Yemen, and that this makes it more likely that we will have to expend blood and treasure in responding to those kinds of problems. And unfortunately, when that happens, everyone's pulling their hair out. They're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe we're getting pulled in." But they're setting the conditions now where that won't be able to be avoided if this agreement goes.
Yeah, Trita Parsi has this habit of asking this question that rarely gets asked in foreign policy circles here in the United States, which is this good for the United States?
Right.
Why are we actually doing this? And it's an uncomfortable question when you're looking at it, because it does not seem that way, because what these Gulf countries want out of this is a defense pledge that there will be basically a NATO-like military alliance, that if any of them feel like they have been affronted by Yemen or by some other Iranian proxy in the region, that then it triggers a Gulf version of an Article 5, and the U.S. is now obligated to go to war on behalf of these Gulf countries. This is happening while Iran and the other countries and the United States are, within inches, it seems like, of striking an Iran deal, which the Gulf countries and Israel very much do not want to happen. Recently, an IRGC colonel was assassinated in Tehran. All the speculation was that this was Israel that had assassinated this colonel in order to make it more difficult for them to strike a deal between Iran and the U.S. over their nuclear program, because striking that deal would require delisting the IRGC from the terror watch list, the terror list. So what is Trita's argument about how, and this is part of your piece, about how the Iran deal fits into this defense, this kind of Middle East NATO that Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Israel are trying to foist on the U.S.?
Yeah, so the way he describes it, which I think is very reasonable, is that it incentivizes these regional actors to get into more conflicts, knowing that the most powerful military party on earth is going to be able to bail them out. And I think that's exactly right. It not only incentivizes them to be more reckless in their foreign policy, it disincentivizes moves towards drawing down hostilities with these regional powers. And my fear is that there will be some sort of short-term JCPOA, Iran normalization, thrown into this as a sweetener to kind of try to sell it to the progressive wing, knowing that when Biden is out of office, the Republicans will immediately abrogate it, but the U.S. agreement with the Persian Gulf states, the Gulf monarchies, will remain.
Abraham Plus stuff will say, and these are already impulsive, reckless leaders. Like if you look at what's going on in Ethiopia, Somalia, Yemen. They blockaded Qatar, which has an American base.
Right.
And you're going to embolden them to do more. Fascinating piece, and we're going to keep watching this. This is history in the making. Like we are reshaping our relationships with these countries right now, and not necessarily in a positive direction, and it's going to lead us potentially to more war. So stick around. We're going to come back with an election recap from this past week. Thanks again for watching this. As always, go to theintercept.com to check out Ken and my work. And thank you for supporting Breaking Points, which supports this partnership. And thank you, Ken.
Good to be with you.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.